The power went out at exactly 3:15 in the afternoon, and I knew I was in trouble because my backup generator had failed its inspection 2 weeks prior, and I was still waiting on parts from the manufacturer. I'm Lucas Lawson, a 42-year-old software developer working remotely from my townhouse in Ridgewood Estates, a gated community in suburban Phoenix, Arizona. The February cold snap had caught everyone off guard, with temperatures plummeting to the low 30s at night, unusual for the desert. My circulation issues stemming from a car accident 3 years ago meant that maintaining proper body temperature wasn't just about comfort anymore. It was a medical necessity that my doctor took seriously enough to prescribe a special space heater with an integrated medical alert system. The device looked like an ordinary ceramic space heater, the kind you might find at any big box store, but inside was sophisticated monitoring equipment worth several $1,000s. It tracked my core temperature through infrared sensors and could automatically alert emergency services if my vitals dropped to dangerous levels. My insurance company had fought tooth and nail against covering it, until my cardiologist submitted a mountain of paperwork explaining how the accident had damaged my autonomic nervous system's ability to regulate temperature properly. When the power died that afternoon, I immediately grabbed the heater from my home office and carried it downstairs to the living room where I had better natural light from the large windows. The unit had a 4-hour battery backup specifically for situations like this. I plugged it into its own dedicated circuit and felt the immediate warmth spreading across the room. That's when I heard the knock at my door. I should have known better than to answer. The distinctive pattern of 3 sharp raps followed by 2 slower ones was practically trademarked by Brenda Morrison, the president of the Ridgewood Estates Homeowners Association, and the bane of my existence since I'd moved in 18 months ago. "Lucas, I can see your shadow through the window," she called out in that nasally voice that somehow managed to sound both sing-song and threatening at the same time. "I need to speak with you about an urgent community matter." I opened the door to find Brenda standing there in her typical uniform, a beige pantsuit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment, pearl earrings that caught the afternoon light, and an expression that suggested she smelled something unpleasant. Her blonde hair was pulled back so tightly I wondered if it contributed to her perpetually pinched expression. At 53, she'd made being the HOA president her entire personality, treating our small community of 46 townhouses like her personal fiefdom. "Brenda, if this is about the Rosemary plan on my front step again, I already explained that the covenant says no permanent landscaping modifications. It's in a pot, it's portable. Therefore, it's not a modification." She waved her hand dismissively, her manicured nails flashing red. "That matter is still under review by the Architectural Committee. I'm here about the power outage. As community president, I'm conducting wellness checks on all residents and ensuring everyone is following proper emergency protocols." "I'm fine. Thanks for checking." I started to close the door, but she'd already wedged her sensible 2-inch heel against the frame. "I need to verify that you're not using any prohibited heating sources. The covenants are very clear about fire hazards during emergencies. No candles, no gas-powered generators within 20 feet of the structures, and absolutely no space heaters that haven't been approved by the safety committee." My jaw tightened. Space heaters are specifically allowed in the winter months according to Section 12 of the covenants. I was at the meeting when that was voted on last year. Allowed, yes, but they must be on the approved list. She pulled out her phone and started scrolling through what I assumed was some kind of spreadsheet she'd created to torture residents. "I'll need to inspect your unit to ensure compliance." You'll need a 24-hour notice and consent from the homeowner, which you don't have, I said, quoting the Arizona Planned Communities Act back at her. I'd done my homework after her third frivolous violation notice about my door wreath being a quarter-inch too large in diameter. Her face flushed slightly, but she maintained her composure. During emergency situations, the HOA president has broad authority to ensure the safety of all residents. That includes immediate inspections without prior notice. It's in the Emergency Procedures Addendum that was passed last month. The one that was voted on at a meeting announced with only 48 hours notice instead of the required 7 days. I raised my eyebrows. I'm pretty sure that vote was invalid, and I'm pretty sure my lawyer would agree. The mention of a lawyer made her eyes narrow. Mr. Lawson, I'm simply trying to keep everyone safe. If you're not in violation of any policies, then you have nothing to hide. The warmth from my space heater was drifting out through the open door, and I could see her gaze shift past me to spot it sitting in my living room. Her expression changed from annoyed to triumphant. "Is that a Core Temp X7000? She asked, pointing. "Those are absolutely not on the approved list. In fact, they were specifically flagged at last month's safety committee meeting as a fire risk due to the battery backup system." "That's my medical equipment," I said firmly, "and it's protected under the Fair Housing Act. You can't restrict my use of medical devices." "Medical equipment," she actually laughed, a sharp sound like ice cracking. "It's a space heater, Lucas. Don't be dramatic. I'm going to have to ask you to turn it off immediately and surrender it to HOA custody until the power is restored and the safety committee can properly evaluate it." "You're not taking my heater, Brenda. It's prescription medical equipment. My doctor ordered it specifically because of my condition." A likely story. She pulled out her phone and started typing. "I'm documenting this violation and your refusal to comply with a direct safety order from HOA leadership. This will result in an immediate fine of $250, increasing by $50 per day until compliance is achieved." The cold air from outside was starting to seep into my entryway, and I could feel the familiar discomfort beginning in my extremities that signaled my body's inability to properly regulate its temperature. I needed to close the door and get back to the heater. "Document whatever you want, Brenda. Send me the fine notice in writing. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to close my door." I pushed the door firmly, and she had to step back or risk losing her toes. Through the window, I watched her stand on my small porch for another 30 seconds, typing furiously on her phone, before she finally stalked away toward the next townhouse in line. My hands were already starting to feel numb, a bad sign. I returned to the living room and positioned myself near the space heater, feeling the warmth slowly restore circulation to my fingers. The device's small LED display showed my current core temperature at 97.4 degrees, slightly below normal but not yet in the danger zone. The monitoring system would alert me if I dropped below 96 degrees, and it would automatically contact emergency services if I hit 95. I tried to focus on work, but my laptop battery was draining fast and I couldn't concentrate anyway. The run-in with Brenda had left me rattled. In the 18 months since I'd moved to Ridgewood Estates, she'd sent me 17 violation notices for various invented infractions. My mailbox was 3/8 of an inch too far forward from the property line. My garage door was left open for 27 minutes, exceeding the 20-minute maximum. My trash bins were visible from the street for 4 minutes past the 7 a.m. deadline on collection day. The list went on and on. Other neighbors had warned me about her when I first moved in. Todd and Sarah Jenkins from Unit 23, told me she'd force them to repaint their front door twice because the approved beige color they'd chosen looked too yellow in certain afternoon light. Marcus Chen from Unit 8 had been fined repeatedly for his daughter's chalk drawings on their private patio, visible through the fence slats, because it constituted visual blight. The woman was relentless, treating the HOA covenants like constitutional law and herself as the Supreme Court. The afternoon dragged on, the temperature inside my townhouse slowly dropping as the sun moved across the sky. By 5 p.m., it was 62 degrees inside, and my space heater was working overtime to keep me warm. The battery backup had kicked in seamlessly when the power died, and I'd been monitoring its status carefully. It showed about 2 hours of charge remaining at current usage levels. That's when my doorbell rang again. Through the peephole, I saw Brenda standing there with 2 other people. Gary Peterson, the HOA vice president and owner of a local insurance agency, and a younger woman I didn't recognize wearing a lime green vest that said Emergency Response Volunteer. I opened the door a crack, leaving the security chain engaged. "What now, Mr. Lawson? We've received reports from multiple neighbors about concerning smoke or fumes coming from your unit," Brenda announced in her most officious voice. "As per emergency protocols, we need to conduct an immediate inspection to verify there are no fire hazards. There's no smoke. There are no fumes. You're making things up." Gary stepped forward, and I'd always thought he was relatively reasonable compared to Brenda. "Look, Lucas, I'm sure everything is fine, but we did get a call from Mrs. Patterson next door saying she smelled something burning. We just need to do a quick walkthrough to verify everything is safe. 5 minutes, tops, Mrs. Patterson is 87 years old and calls the fire department when someone burns toast," I said, but I could feel my resolve weakening. Gary had a point about being cautious, even if I suspected Brenda had manufactured this entire situation. "If you refuse access during a legitimate emergency response situation, we'll have no choice but to contact the fire department to conduct a welfare check," Brenda added. "I'm sure they'll be very interested in that unapproved heating device you're using." She had me cornered and she knew it. If the fire department came, they'd have actual legal authority to enter my home. Better to let these 3 idiots look around and confirm there was no emergency than to escalate things further. I unhooked the chain and stepped back. 5 minutes. Touch nothing. And for the record, I'm documenting this entire interaction and will be filing a formal complaint with the state HOA Oversight Board about harassment. Brenda swept past me like she owned the place, followed by Gary and the volunteer, whose name tag identified her as Rebecca, emergency team member. They spread out through my first floor, and I followed closely behind to ensure no one touched anything. "There," Brenda said, pointing at my space heater like she'd discovered buried treasure. "That's the source of the smell Mrs. Patterson reported." Those battery backup heaters are known to emit fumes when they overheat. It's not overheating. It's functioning exactly as designed, and there's no smell because it's electric, not combustion-based. I'm going to have to insist you turn this off immediately." She moved toward it, and I stepped between her and the device. "Back off, Brenda. I already told you this is medical equipment. You have no authority to confiscate my medical equipment." "It's a space heater," she said, enunciating each word like I was a small child. "Stop calling it medical equipment. You're not fooling anyone." "Rebecca, check the temperature readings on the unit," Gary suggested, apparently trying to mediate. The volunteer moved closer and peered at the LED display. "It shows 97.6 degrees, and there's a pulse reading of 72 beats per minute," she reported. Also something about monitoring mode active. That's because it's tracking my vital signs, I explained. It's a Core Temp X7000 medical-grade environmental control system with integrated biometric monitoring. My cardiologist prescribed it after my accident damaged my ability to thermoregulate properly. The heater part is just one component. The real value is in the monitoring system that alerts emergency services if my core temperature drops to dangerous levels. Gary and Rebecca both looked uncertain, but Brenda's expression remained skeptical. If that were true, you'd have documentation from your doctor. You'd have shown us medical exemption paperwork. I don't need to show you my private medical information, I said. The Fair Housing Act protects me from exactly this kind of harassment. I'm entitled to reasonable accommodations for my medical condition, and that includes using prescribed medical equipment. Convenient that you claim this now, after being caught using prohibited equipment. Brenda pulled out her phone and took several photos of the space heater. I'm submitting this to the HOA board for review. Until they make a determination, this device needs to be surrendered to HOA custody. Are you insane? You're not taking my medical equipment. Mr. Lawson, don't make this more difficult than it needs to be. She moved toward the heater again, and this time I grabbed her wrist. Touch my property and I'll call the police for attempted theft. You're assaulting an HOA officer, Brenda shrieked, yanking her arm back. Gary, Rebecca, you're both witnesses. He physically attacked me. I stopped you from stealing my property. That's not assault, that's defense against theft. Gary held up both hands. Okay, everyone calm down. Lucas, nobody's trying to steal anything. Brenda, maybe we should table this until we can get clarification from the homeowner's insurance company and the HOA attorney. If this really is medical equipment, we need to be careful about how we proceed. The emergency protocols are clear, Brenda insisted. During a power outage, any device that poses a potential fire risk can be temporarily confiscated by HOA emergency response personnel. We return it once the emergency is over and proper safety verification has been completed. Show me where in the covenants it says that, I challenged. She scrolled through her phone again, turning the screen to show me a document. Emergency Response Procedures, Section 7, Subsection D, adopted at the January 15th meeting. I skimmed the text and felt my stomach sink. The language was vague enough that she could arguably interpret it as granting confiscation authority. It was also the same meeting with the invalid notice period I'd mentioned earlier. That vote was illegitimate because the meeting wasn't properly noticed, I said. Therefore, this policy isn't enforceable. A quorum was present, and the vote passed 17-3, Brenda countered. The meeting notice timeline is a procedural issue that doesn't invalidate the substantive vote. That's not how it works under Arizona law, and you know it. We stood there in my living room, the space heater humming quietly between us, neither of us willing to back down. My core temperature had stabilized at 97.8, but I could feel stress making my heart rate increase. The monitor would flag that if it got too high. I'm calling the non-emergency police line, Gary finally said. Let's get an official opinion on what should happen here. Brenda looked annoyed but nodded. Fine. They'll confirm that we have authority to secure potential hazards during emergencies. I wanted to argue, but decided having police involvement might actually work in my favor. They'd be able to see this was clearly harassment, and maybe having an official report would help when I filed my complaint against Brenda and the HOA board. Gary stepped out onto my front porch to make the call while Brenda stood guard over my space heater like I might try to smuggle it out of the room. Rebecca looked increasingly uncomfortable with the whole situation. shifting her weight from foot to foot near my bookshelf. "You know this is ridiculous, right?" I said to Brenda. "Even if you somehow manage to take my heater, what exactly do you think will happen? I'll just be cold. This is medically necessary equipment." "What I think will happen is that you'll go to a hotel like several other residents have already done," she replied. "Or you'll go stay with family until power is restored. Normal people don't insist on staying in their homes during power outages with dangerous equipment." "It's not dangerous, and I have every right to remain in my own home." "Rights come with responsibilities, Mr. Lawson. Your responsibility is to follow the community covenants you agreed to when you purchased this property. And your responsibility is to manage the HOA fairly and legally, not to harass residents with frivolous violations and invented emergencies." Her face flushed red. "Frivolous? I have spent countless volunteer hours trying to maintain property values and community standards in this neighborhood. Residents like you who think the rules don't apply to them make everyone's property values decline. My rosemary plant in a pot isn't affecting anyone's property values, Brenda. It's not about one plant. It's about maintaining consistent standards. If I let you have an unapproved plant, then Margaret in Unit 12 wants a tomato garden, and soon we look like a trailer park instead of a respectable planned community." Before I could respond to that offensive comparison, Gary came back inside. "Police are sending someone over. They said it might be 20 to 30 minutes given that they're dealing with multiple power outage-related calls." Great. Now I got to stand around in my own living room for half an hour with these three watching my every move. I sat down on my couch, positioning myself to stay within range of the space heater's warmth while we waited. The silence was awkward and oppressive. Rebecca tried to make small talk about the unusual cold weather, but neither Brenda nor I were interested in pretending this was a social visit. My core temperature held steady, but I kept checking the monitor display obsessively, worried about what would happen if Brenda actually managed to confiscate my heater. The battery showed 94 minutes of charge remaining. The power company's automated system had estimated 4 to 6 hours for restoration, which meant even if I kept the heater, I'd potentially run out of battery before electricity came back. I'd been hoping the outage would resolve quickly, but the longer this standoff continued, the more concerned I became about what the evening would bring. 27 minutes later, a Phoenix police cruiser pulled up outside. Through my front window, I watched a female officer in her mid-30s step out and approach my door. Her nameplate read Officer M. Torres when I let her in. "Good evening, folks. I understand there's some kind of dispute about emergency protocols." She looked around at the four of us, clearly trying to assess the situation. Everyone started talking at once, and Officer Torres held up her hand. "One at a time, please. Let's start with you," she said, pointing at me. "This is your residence?" "Yes, I'm Lucas Lawson. I own this townhouse." "These three are from the HOA, and they're trying to confiscate my medical equipment during a power outage." I gave her the condensed version of the situation, explaining about my medical condition, the prescribed space heater with monitoring system, and Brenda's insistence that it violated HOA emergency protocols. Officer Torres listened carefully, taking notes on a small pad. Then she turned to Brenda. "And you are Brenda Morrison, president of the Ridgewood Estates Homeowners Association. We received reports of smoke or fumes coming from this unit, and when we investigated, we discovered Mr. Lawson is using an unapproved and potentially dangerous heating device. Our emergency protocols give us authority to temporarily confiscate hazardous items during community emergencies." "There's no smoke," I interjected. "She made that up as a pretext to harass me about the heater." Did you actually see or smell smoke? Officer Torres asked Brenda. Mrs. Patterson from next door reported concerning odors. As HOA president, I'm obligated to investigate all safety complaints. Uh-huh, and this device. Officer Torres walked over to examine my space heater. You're saying it's dangerous. It's not on the HOA's approved list, and the battery backup system poses a fire risk according to our safety committee. You have documentation from a fire marshal or certified safety inspector stating that this specific model is dangerous? The officer asked. Brenda hesitated. The safety committee reviewed the specifications and determined it didn't meet our standards. So that's a no. Officer Torres turned to me. Do you have documentation that this is prescribed medical equipment? I grabbed my phone and pulled up the photos I'd taken of the prescription paperwork when I first received the device. I showed her the letter from my cardiologist explaining my condition and the medical necessity of the environmental control system. I also showed her the invoice from the medical supply company, which clearly listed it as DME, durable medical equipment, and showed partial insurance coverage. Officer Torres reviewed everything carefully. Okay, so from a legal perspective, this is pretty clear-cut. Mr. Lawson has documented medical equipment that's prescribed by his physician. Under the Fair Housing Act and Arizona disability law, he's entitled to reasonable accommodations, which would include using medical equipment regardless of HOA policies. But our emergency protocols, Brenda started. Madam, your emergency protocols can't override federal disability law. If this was genuinely creating an immediate hazard, like if there was actual smoke or fire risk, we could make an argument for temporary removal. But I don't see any evidence of that. The device appears to be functioning normally, and it's clearly a medical necessity for this gentleman. So I can refuse to surrender it? I asked, wanting absolute clarity. Yes, sir. They have no legal authority to confiscate your medical equipment. If they attempted to do so forcibly, that would constitute theft under Arizona revised statutes. Brenda's face had gone from red to pale. Officer, you don't understand the complexities of HOA governance. These covenants are legally binding contracts. I understand fine, madam. And I also understand that those contracts can't violate federal law. My suggestion would be that you folks table this issue until you can consult with the HOA's attorney about disability accommodations and the Fair Housing Act. Mr. Lawson, I'd recommend you send the HOA a formal written request for reasonable accommodation along with copies of your medical documentation. That creates a paper trail if this escalates further. I'll do that, I said, feeling vindicated. Are we free to go? Gary asked, looking relieved that this was wrapping up. Yes, but I want to be clear. Officer Torres looked directly at Brenda. If I get called back here tonight for another alleged emergency that turns out to be HOA harassment, someone's going to end up cited for misuse of emergency services. We've got actual problems to deal with during this power outage. Understood, Brenda said tightly. The three of them filed out of my townhouse, Brenda shooting me a look that promised this wasn't over. Officer Torres lingered for a moment. I've seen a lot of HOA disputes in this district, she said quietly. Document everything. Keep copies of all communications. People like that HOA president, they tend to escalate when they don't get their way. If she does anything that feels like harassment or retaliation, call us. Not the non-emergency line. Just dial 911 if you feel threatened. Thank you, officer. I really appreciate your help. After she left, I locked my door and returned to my space heater, my hands shaking slightly from the adrenaline of the confrontation. The device was still humming along peacefully. The display showing my core temperature had actually increased slightly during the argument to 98.1. Stress response, probably. My heart rate was elevated too, at 88 beats per minute. I forced myself to take deep breaths and calm down. The last thing I needed was for my vitals to trigger an emergency alert when there wasn't actually a medical crisis. The sun was setting now, the temperature outside dropping fast. Inside my townhouse, it was down to 59 degrees and falling. I pulled a blanket around myself and settled in near the heater, scrolling through my phone to find the email address for the HOA's management company. I wanted to get my formal accommodation request submitted tonight while everything was fresh. I was halfway through drafting the email when I heard a sound outside that made my blood run cold. Someone was at my side gate, the one that led to my small private patio. I could hear the metal latch rattling. Probably just a cat or the wind, I told myself. But the rational part of my brain noted that the wind had died down after sunset, and we didn't have many outdoor cats in the neighborhood, thanks to the HOA's strict pet policies. The rattling stopped, and I heard footsteps moving away. I got up and went to my back sliding door, peeking through the vertical blinds. In the dim twilight, I couldn't see anyone, but I had an uneasy feeling that wouldn't go away. I returned to my email and finished the formal request for reasonable accommodation, attaching photos of all my medical documentation. I sent copies to the HOA management company, the HOA board email address, and Brenda's personal email that was listed on all her violation notices. Paper trail established. By 8 p.m., the temperature in my townhouse had dropped to 55 degrees. My space heater was doing its best, but it was designed to maintain temperature in a single room, not heat an entire two-story townhouse as the cold desert night settled in. The battery indicator showed 43 minutes remaining. I checked the power company's website again. Estimated restoration time had been pushed back to between 9 and 11 p.m. The battery might last that long if I was lucky, but it would be close. I was considering my options, wondering if I should actually take Brenda's suggestion and go to a hotel, when I heard my front door lock rattling. Not the doorbell. The actual lock, like someone was trying to use a key. I jumped up from the couch and rushed to the door, yanking it open to find Brenda standing there with a key in her hand, looking startled at being caught. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I demanded. "The HOA maintains master keys for all units for emergency access," she said, recovering her composure. "I was conducting a follow-up welfare check." At 8 p.m., in the dark, using a key instead of knocking, my voice was rising. "That's called breaking and entering, Brenda. Don't be dramatic." The covenants clearly state that HOA representatives may access units for emergency purposes. With notice and consent, which you don't have, and a police officer told you 3 hours ago to back off. What part of that didn't you understand? "I'm simply doing my job, Mr. Lawson." A job I take very seriously, unlike some people who think they're above the community rules. "Get off my property, now, before I call the police again." "Fine." She took a step back but held up the key. "But you should know that I have every right to access this property under emergency conditions. Your refusal to cooperate with legitimate HOA business is going to result in additional fines and potential legal action. Bring it on. I'll see you in court, and we'll let a judge decide whether you're following legitimate HOA business or engaging in targeted harassment." She turned and walked away, and I slammed the door hard enough to rattle the frame. My hands were shaking again, and I could feel my heart pounding. The space heater's monitor beeped softly. a warning that my heart rate had exceeded 100 beats per minute. I pulled out my phone and called the non-emergency police line, wanting to report the attempted entry. The dispatcher took my information and said she'd send an officer when one became available, but they were stretched thin dealing with the power outage. It might be a while. Sitting back down, I wrapped myself tighter in my blanket and tried to calm down. The temperature inside was now 53 degrees. The space heater's battery showed 31 minutes remaining, and Brenda Morrison had a key to my house. I couldn't stay here, not with her having access and clearly being unhinged enough to try using it. But I also couldn't leave without the space heater, and I couldn't take it to a hotel because I'd need to plug it in and explain to hotel staff why I needed a special outlet configuration. And that would take time I didn't have. My phone rang, showing a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered it. "Mr. Lawson, this is Detective Frank Ramirez with the Phoenix Police Department. I understand you called in to report an attempted unauthorized entry." "Yes, the HOA president tried to use a master key to enter my townhouse without permission about 10 minutes ago. I'm actually calling about something else, but this might be related. We received a 911 call from your address about 15 minutes ago. An automated alert indicating a medical emergency with dangerously low core body temperature. But when we tried to call back, we couldn't reach anyone." My stomach dropped. I didn't make that call. My space heater has an integrated medical alert system, but my vitals are fine. My core temperature is 97.9 right now. There was a pause. "Can you check your device and see if it shows any recent alerts in its history?" I walked over to the space heater and used the small control panel to access the log screen. What I saw made my blood run cold. It shows an alert was triggered at 7:43 p.m. Core temperature reading of 94.2 degrees. But that's impossible. I was sitting right here, and the device was showing normal readings all evening. Could someone have tampered with it? Changed the settings remotely? It doesn't have remote access. It's a standalone medical device. But even as I said it, I remembered the rattling at my side gate, the attempted entry at my front door. Someone was trying to get into my house earlier, through the side gate first, then the front door with a key. What if they got in through the back somehow? Stay where you are, Mr. Lawson. I'm sending units to your location now. Within 6 minutes, I had 2 police cruisers and Detective Ramirez at my door. The detective was in his early 40s, with graying hair and the tired eyes of someone who'd seen too much. He examined my space heater carefully while the uniformed officers checked my townhouse for signs of entry. The device shows it was unplugged for approximately 4 minutes starting at 7:39 p.m., Detective Ramirez said, reading from the diagnostic screen. When it was plugged back in, the sensors detected a temperature reading below the emergency threshold, triggering the automated alert. But I was sitting right here. I would have noticed if someone unplugged it. Were you sitting here the entire time? No bathroom breaks, no trips upstairs, I thought back. I went to the kitchen to get water around 7:30, maybe 7:35. It only took a minute or two. That would have been enough time if someone had access to your home. He turned to the officers. Anything? One of them came down from upstairs. Back bedroom window was unlocked. Looks like someone might have jimmied it from the outside. There are scuff marks on the sill consistent with someone climbing through. Detective Ramirez's expression darkened. "Mr. Lawson, I need you to walk me through everything that happened today with this HOA president." I gave him the full story, starting with Brenda's initial visit demanding to inspect my heater, the confrontation with her and the other HOA members, Officer Torres's intervention, And finally, Brenda attempting to use a master key to enter my house. The detective took detailed notes and had me send him copies of all photos and documentation I'd referenced. This is looking like attempted theft at minimum, possibly burglary and definitely harassment, he said. The fact that she triggered a medical emergency alert during the attempt makes it more serious. If your core temperature had actually been that low, the delayed emergency response could have been dangerous. So, what happens now? Now I go have a conversation with Miss Morrison. He handed me his card. Lock all your windows and doors. Consider changing your locks first thing in the morning so that master key won't work anymore. And keep that medical device close. I don't think she'll try anything else tonight with police involvement, but better safe than sorry. After they left, I did a complete check of every window and door in my townhouse, making sure everything was locked tight. The back bedroom window had definitely been forced, the lock mechanism showing damage that would need to be repaired. Brenda or someone working with her had actually broken into my home while I was downstairs. The space heater's battery now showed 18 minutes remaining. It was 8:47 p.m., and the power company's website still estimated restoration between 9 and 11. I was cutting it dangerously close. I grabbed my car keys and unplugged the space heater, carrying it carefully out to my garage. My car had a 12-volt outlet that I could use with a DC adapter in an emergency. It wouldn't charge the heater's battery, but it would let me run it off the car's power while I waited for electricity to be restored. I had just settled into my driver's seat, heater plugged in and running, when my phone rang again. Detective Ramirez. Mr. Lawson, I'm at Miss Morrison's residence. She's denying everything, claims she never tried to enter your home tonight and has no knowledge of any medical alert being triggered. But here's the interesting thing. When I asked to see the HOA's master keys, she produced a set that includes keys to all 46 units. She admitted she has unrestricted access to all of them. That can't be legal. It's questionable at best, and we're looking into whether that violates any privacy laws. But more immediately, I noticed your space heater sitting on her kitchen counter when I arrived. My heart nearly stopped. What? But I have it right here. I looked down at the device humming away in my passenger seat. You have your space heater with you right now. Yes, I brought it to my car because the battery was dying and I needed to use the car's power outlet. There was a long pause. Then whose space heater is sitting in Brenda Morrison's kitchen? Understanding hit me like ice water. She bought one. She bought the same model so she could switch them. That's why the alert was triggered. She unplugged mine and took it, replacing it with an identical one that hadn't been programmed with my biometric data. Which means the device here doesn't have your medical alert system configured. She stole your actual medical equipment and left you with a useless decoy. Can you arrest her? That's theft of medical equipment. That's got to be a serious crime. I'm already discussing that with my sergeant. Stay on the line. I sat in my cold garage, heater running, listening to muffled conversation on the other end of the call. My core temperature was starting to drop again, down to 97.4 despite the heater's efforts. The stress of the evening was catching up with me. Mr. Lawson. Detective Ramirez came back on the line. We're placing Miss Morrison under arrest for theft of medical equipment, burglary, and filing a false police report. We'll need you to come down to the station tomorrow to make a formal statement and verify which device is actually yours. How did she file a false police report? She called 911 about an hour ago, reporting a suspicious person trying to break into units in your neighborhood. Gave a description that matches you. When officers responded, they couldn't find anyone. We think she was trying to create a narrative that you were the one acting suspiciously to cover her own attempted break-in. This is insane. I just wanted to use my medical equipment in peace. Unfortunately, HOA disputes like this escalate more often than you'd think. The difference is most HOA presidents don't resort to burglary and theft. She crossed a serious line tonight. 20 minutes later, Detective Ramirez arrived at my townhouse with my actual space heater. I could tell it was mine because the corner had a small scratch from where I'd bumped it against a doorframe when first bringing it home from the medical supply company. The detective had me verify the serial number against my paperwork, confirming it was indeed my device. Miss Morrison is being processed at the station now, he explained. She initially denied stealing it, but when we compared the serial numbers, she claimed she was temporarily confiscating it for safety reasons under HOA emergency protocols. I explained that those protocols don't give her authority to break into homes and steal medical equipment. What happens next? She'll be arraigned tomorrow morning. Given that this is theft of medical equipment during what she knew was a medical emergency for you, the DA is likely to take it seriously. She's looking at felony charges. Arizona takes theft of medical devices very seriously, especially when the victim is disabled. I'm not really disabled, I started to say, but the detective held up his hand. You have a documented medical condition that requires assistive equipment. Under the law, that qualifies. Don't downplay what she did, Mr. Lawson. She broke into your home and stole equipment that monitors your vital signs. If you'd gone to sleep not realizing the device wasn't actually working and your core temperature had dropped during the night, you could have been seriously hurt. He was right. I'd been so focused on fighting with Brenda about HOA rules that I hadn't fully processed how dangerous her actions had been. Will I need to testify? Almost certainly, if it goes to trial. But cases like this often result in plea deals. We have her dead to rights with physical evidence, the serial number match, and the fact that she tried to enter your home with a key despite being told by officers to stay away. He glanced at his watch. The power should be back on soon according to the latest update. Are you going to be okay here tonight? I'll be fine now that I have my actual medical equipment back. Thank you, Detective. After he left, I plugged my real space heater back into its dedicated outlet and watched the familiar display light up, showing my current vitals. Core temperature 97.6 and rising. Heart rate settling back to a normal 74 beats per minute. The battery was at 11%, but it would start charging now that it was plugged in. At 9:37 p.m., the power suddenly hummed back to life. Lights flickered on throughout my townhouse, and I heard the welcome sound of my heating system kicking in. Within minutes, warm air was flowing through the vents. I wanted nothing more than to collapse into bed, but I still needed to deal with the broken window upstairs and document everything that had happened. I spent the next hour taking photos of the damaged window lock, writing down a detailed timeline of the evening's events, and forwarding everything to the email address Detective Ramirez had given me. Around 11 p.m., my doorbell rang. Every muscle in my body tensed, wondering if somehow Brenda had made bail already. But when I checked the peephole, I saw Gary Peterson standing there alone, looking miserable. I opened the door cautiously. If you're here on HOA business, Gary, I'm not interested. I'm here to apologize, he said, and to resign as vice president, effective immediately. I had no idea Brenda would go that far. When the police showed up at the HOA meeting tonight to inform the board about her arrest, I felt sick. I should have pushed back harder when she was insisting we confront you about the heater. You should have, I agreed, but at least you tried to de-escalate things when you were here. Can I come in for just a minute? I have some information you need to know." Against my better judgment, I let him in. We sat in my living room, my space heater still humming away even though the main heat was working now. "The HOA board held an emergency meeting tonight after the police left," Gary explained. "We voted unanimously to immediately revoke all master key access. No one should have had unrestricted keys to every unit. That was Brenda's doing without board approval. We're also voting to dissolve the safety committee she created and rescind those emergency protocols she pushed through." "That's a start. There's more. We reviewed her records as president, and she's been issuing violation notices to certain residents at a rate way beyond what's normal. You, Marcus Chen, the Jenkins family, about 8 others. The common thread seems to be that you all either voted against her proposals at meetings or called her out on procedural issues. So it was retaliation. I knew it. We're going to void all pending fines she issued and refund any fines that were already paid. The board is also going to recommend that the community not pursue prosecution of you for defending yourself if she tries to claim assault from when you grabbed her wrist. That was clearly self-defense of your property. I appreciate that, Gary. But the bigger issue is making sure something like this never happens again. Brenda's gone, but what's to stop the next president from abusing their power? The board is working with our attorney to draft new bylaws that include better checks and balances. Term limits for officers, required board votes for enforcement actions over a certain dollar amount, a formal appeals process for violations. It's going to take a few months to implement, but we're serious about reform. After Gary left, I finally allowed myself to relax. The nightmare evening was over, my medical equipment was safely back in my possession, and Brenda Morrison was facing criminal charges. It wasn't the resolution I'd expected when I woke up that morning, but it was certainly thorough. I checked my space heater one more time before heading upstairs to bed. Core temperature 98.2 degrees, heart rate 68 beats per minute. Battery charged to 43% and climbing. All systems functioning normally. The next morning, I woke to bright sunlight streaming through my bedroom window and my phone buzzing with notifications. I had 17 text messages, 12 emails, and 4 voicemails. Word had spread through the neighborhood about Brenda's arrest. The messages ranged from supportive neighbors expressing outrage at what she'd done, to curious people asking for details, to 3 other residents admitting they'd also had suspicious encounters with Brenda that now took on a more sinister tone. Marcus Chen from Unit 8 texted that Brenda had tried to enter his home using a master key 2 months ago, claiming she needed to inspect his HVAC system, but he'd happened to be home and refused her entry. He'd thought it was just her being overly controlling, but now wondered if she'd been planning something similar. I spent the morning at the police station giving my formal statement to Detective Ramirez. The process took nearly 3 hours as we went through every detail of the previous day's events. I learned that Brenda was being held on $50,000 bail and had not yet managed to post it. "The arraignment is at 2 p.m. today if you want to attend," the detective told me. "You're not required to be there, but victims often find it helpful to see the process moving forward." I decided to go. I wanted to look Brenda Morrison in the eye and see her face consequences for her actions. The courthouse was in downtown Phoenix, a modern glass and concrete structure that handled hundreds of cases daily. I found the correct courtroom and took a seat in the gallery. At exactly 2 p.m., a bailiff brought Brenda in wearing an orange jumpsuit, her hair disheveled and her makeup smudged. She looked smaller somehow, diminished without her power suit and aggressive confidence. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s named Judge Patricia Freeman, reviewed the charges: felony theft of medical equipment, second-degree burglary, filing a false police report, and criminal trespass. The prosecutor laid out the basic facts of the case, emphasizing that Brenda had stolen medical equipment from a disabled resident during a power outage emergency. Brenda's attorney, a harried-looking public defender who'd clearly just gotten the case, argued for reduced bail and painted his client as an overzealous community volunteer who'd made poor decisions but had no criminal intent. Judge Freeman was not impressed. "Counselor, your client broke into a private residence, stole medical monitoring equipment during a power outage, and replaced it with a non-functional device. The victim could have been seriously harmed if his core body temperature had dropped during the night without the alert system functioning. This goes well beyond poor decision-making. Bail will remain at $50,000. Preliminary hearing is scheduled for March 15th. Next case." The whole thing lasted maybe 10 minutes. Brenda was led back out, and she finally spotted me in the gallery as she passed. The look she gave me was pure venom, like somehow this was my fault instead of the consequence of her own criminal actions. I left the courthouse feeling validated. The legal system was taking this seriously. Brenda wasn't going to get away with what she'd done. Over the next few weeks, life slowly returned to normal. I had my locks changed so the old HOA master keys wouldn't work. I installed a security camera system covering all entry points to my townhouse. And I attended the first HOA board meeting since Brenda's arrest. The meeting was packed. Practically every resident showed up, curious about what had happened and wanting to ensure reforms were implemented. Gary Peterson, now serving as interim president, ran the meeting efficiently and without the petty power plays that had characterized Brenda's tenure. The board presented the proposed new bylaws, which included everything Gary had mentioned plus additional protections. Master keys would only be held by the management company and could only be used with proper notice except in genuine emergencies like fire or flood. The Safety Committee and its controversial emergency protocols were formally dissolved. All enforcement actions required a majority board vote rather than unilateral decisions by the president. And residents would have a formal appeals process before fines could be levied. When the vote was called, the new bylaws passed unanimously. Marcus Chen stood up during the public comment period. "I want to thank Lucas Lawson for standing up to harassment that many of us experienced but didn't feel we could fight. If he hadn't documented everything and pushed back against illegal enforcement, Brenda Morrison might have continued abusing her authority for years." Several other residents echoed the sentiment, and I felt awkwardly grateful. I hadn't set out to be some kind of HOA reform hero. I just wanted to use my medical equipment in peace. After the meeting, the Jenkins family approached me. Sarah Jenkins, a kind woman in her 50s, gave me a hug. "We were planning to sell our house and leave because of Brenda's harassment. Now we're staying. You saved this community, Lucas." "I just protected my own rights," I said, "but I'm glad it helped others too." March 15th arrived faster than I expected. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for 10 a.m., and Detective Ramirez had called the day before to let me know I'd probably need to testify briefly to establish the medical necessity of the space heater and confirm the theft. I arrived at the courthouse early and met with the prosecutor, a sharp woman named Amanda Chen who specialized in theft and property crimes. She walked me through what questions she'd ask and prepared me for cross-examination by Brenda's attorney. The defense is going to try to argue that she genuinely believed she had authority to confiscate the device under HOA rules, Amanda explained. Your job is to clearly establish that you told her multiple times it was medical equipment, that a police officer had confirmed she had no authority to take it, and that she then broke into your home to steal it anyway. That shows criminal intent. The hearing room was smaller than the arraignment courtroom. Brenda sat at the defense table with her attorney, now a private lawyer named Richard Castellano, who'd apparently taken her case. She was dressed in civilian clothes again, a conservative navy suit that seemed calculated to make her look respectable and remorseful. Judge Freeman presided over this hearing as well. After some preliminary procedural matters, Amanda Chen called me to the stand. Mr. Lawson, can you explain why you need the Core Temp X7000 device that was taken from your home? I described my car accident 3 years prior, the damage to my autonomic nervous system, and my doctor's prescription for the specialized medical monitoring equipment. I showed the judge copies of my medical documentation. On February 5th of this year, during a power outage, did you have interactions with the defendant Brenda Morrison regarding this medical device? I walked through the entire sequence of events. Her initial demand to inspect it, her calling it a simple space heater despite my explanations, the confrontation with other HOA members, Officer Torres's intervention, and finally the theft that evening. After Officer Torres told Miss Morrison she had no authority to confiscate your medical equipment, did the defendant attempt to access your home again that evening? Yes, I caught her trying to use a master key to unlock my front door around 8 p.m. She claimed it was for a welfare check, but she was trying to enter without knocking or announcing herself. And what happened next? I discovered that someone had broken in through my back bedroom window while I was briefly in the kitchen. My medical device had been unplugged and removed, triggering an emergency alert because the replacement device wasn't configured with my biometric data. When police investigated, they found my actual medical device in Miss Morrison's kitchen. The cross-examination was about as aggressive as Amanda had predicted. Richard Castellano tried to paint me as exaggerating my medical condition and the device's importance. Mr. Lawson, you seem perfectly healthy. How do we know you actually need this specialized equipment? I have 3 years of medical records documenting my condition. My insurance company wouldn't have covered a $7,000 piece of medical equipment if it wasn't medically necessary. But you didn't actually experience a medical emergency that night, did you? Because I caught the theft quickly, and police recovered my device within a few hours. If I'd gone to sleep not realizing the monitoring system wasn't functional and my core temperature had dropped, I could have died. Isn't it true that you have an adversarial relationship with the HOA and had been repeatedly cited for violations? I'd been issued 17 violation notices by Miss Morrison, most of which were either frivolous or procedurally improper. Other residents experienced similar patterns of harassment from her. Judge Freeman interrupted. Counselor, the victim's relationship with the HOA is not relevant to whether your client committed theft and burglary. Move on or wrap up your cross-examination. After I stepped down, Detective Ramirez testified about the investigation and the recovery of my device from Brenda's home. He presented evidence including photos, the serial number verification, and Brenda's own statements admitting she'd taken the device. The hearing lasted about 90 minutes total. At the end, Judge Freeman ruled that there was sufficient evidence to bind Brenda Morrison over for trial on all charges. Miss Morrison, the judge said, looking directly at the defendant, You are a licensed insurance professional who served in a position of community leadership. You should have known better than to take the law into your own hands. The evidence presented today shows a pattern of harassment that escalated to breaking into a resident's home and stealing medical equipment. This court finds probable cause that you committed these crimes. Trial is set for May 20th. Bail continues. Outside the courthouse, Amanda Chen looked satisfied. That went well. Her attorney is probably going to approach us about a plea deal within the next few weeks. Most defendants don't want to risk a jury trial with evidence this strong. What kind of sentence are we looking at? For felony theft of medical equipment plus burglary, probably 3 to 5 years if convicted at trial. With a plea deal, maybe 18 months to 2 years with possibility of probation, depending on her criminal history and willingness to show remorse. She doesn't strike me as the remorseful type. We'll see. Facing prison time has a way of adjusting people's attitudes. Amanda was right. 3 weeks later, Detective Ramirez called to tell me that Brenda's attorney had approached the DA's office about a plea agreement. She was willing to plead guilty to felony theft and criminal trespass in exchange for the burglary charge being reduced to a misdemeanor, and a sentencing recommendation of 2 years with supervised probation after 6 months. You have any objection to that deal? The detective asked. As the victim, your input matters to the DA. I thought about it carefully. Part of me wanted to see Brenda face the maximum consequences for what she'd done, but another part just wanted closure and to move on with my life. My main concern is making sure she can never be in a position of power over residents again, I said. Can the plea deal include restrictions on her serving in HOA leadership? I'll ask the prosecutor to include that. Good thinking. The final plea agreement included a provision that Brenda Morrison could not serve as an officer or board member of any homeowners association for 10 years. She'd plead guilty to felony theft of medical equipment and misdemeanor criminal trespass. She'd serve 6 months in county jail followed by 18 months of supervised probation, perform 500 hours of community service, and pay restitution for my new locks, security system, and medical monitoring costs that had resulted from the theft. The sentencing hearing was in early May. Brenda stood before Judge Freeman and formally entered her guilty plea in a quiet, defeated voice. Gone was the aggressive confidence I'd encountered that February afternoon. She looked older, tired, and broken. Judge Freeman accepted the plea agreement but added her own commentary. Miss Morrison, you held a position of trust in your community. Residents relied on you to manage their homeowners association fairly and legally. Instead, you abused that trust to harass residents you disagreed with, and ultimately you committed serious crimes against a disabled member of your community. You're fortunate the victim in this case survived without serious harm. I hope you use your time in custody to reflect on how your actions endangered another person's life. Yes, Your Honor, Brenda whispered. I'm also imposing a condition that you undergo a mental health evaluation and comply with any recommended treatment. Your pattern of behavior suggests some underlying issues that need to be addressed if you're to successfully reintegrate into society after your sentence. After the hearing concluded, Amanda Chen pulled me aside. That's as good an outcome as we could have hoped for. She'll serve real jail time, she's banned from HOA leadership, and there's now a criminal record that will follow her for the rest of her life. You can move forward knowing justice was served. I returned to Ridgewood Estates that afternoon feeling like a weight had been lifted. The nightmare that started with a simple power outage was finally, truly over. Life in the neighborhood improved dramatically under the new HOA leadership. Gary Peterson served as president for the remainder of Brenda's term, then chose not to run for re-election. A retired teacher named Janet Williams took over, and she ran the association like a cooperative community rather than a petty dictatorship. The frivolous enforcement action stopped. The harassment ended. Residents actually began to enjoy living in Ridgewood Estates again, instead of dreading the next violation notice. Marcus Chen and I became friends, bonding over our shared experiences dealing with Brenda's retaliation. His daughter drew me a thank you picture of a superhero defending a house with a cape and everything. I hung it on my refrigerator. The Jenkins family invited me over for dinner to celebrate them deciding to stay in the neighborhood. Over Sarah's excellent pot roast, Todd raised his glass in a toast. To Lucas, for having the courage to stand up to a bully when the rest of us were too tired or scared to fight. To Justice, I replied, clinking my glass against his, and to reasonable HOA leadership. 6 months after Brenda's sentencing, I received a letter forwarded through the district attorney's office. It was from Brenda, apparently written as part of her court-ordered treatment program. The letter was long and rambling, but certain parts stood out. I realize now that I was wrong to harass you and other residents. I became obsessed with control and enforcement to the point where I lost sight of basic human decency and legal boundaries. I had no right to enter your home or take your medical equipment. I endangered your life because of my own ego and need to be right. I'm sorry for what I did to you. The apology felt genuine, though carefully crafted with the help of whatever therapist she was seeing. I didn't respond to the letter. Some things don't require a response. She'd said her piece, I'd acknowledged it, and we could both move forward separately. My medical condition continued to be manageable with my space heater and monitoring system. I'd had a few cold snaps over the following winters, but I always had backup plans in place now. A portable battery system that could run the heater for up to 8 hours. A generator that I kept properly maintained and inspected, and phone numbers for 3 different hotels within 10 miles that I'd confirmed could accommodate my medical equipment needs if necessary. The security cameras I'd installed after the break-in proved useful in unexpected ways. I captured footage of a package thief who'd been hitting our neighborhood, leading to their arrest. I documented a hit and run in the parking lot that helped a neighbor with their insurance claim. And I had video evidence of every interaction with my property, just in case. The HOA never again questioned my right to use medical equipment. The new bylaws included explicit protections for residents with disabilities and medical needs. The reformed appeals process ensured that any enforcement actions were fair and legally sound. And the restrictions on master key access meant I never had to worry about someone entering my home without permission. A year after the theft, I was working from home on a sunny March afternoon when my doorbell rang. I checked the security camera feed on my phone and saw a woman in her late 20s standing there with a small child, maybe 4 years old, holding her hand. I opened the door cautiously. "Can I help you? Are you Lucas Lawson?" she asked. "Yes, I'm Jennifer Morrison, Brenda Morrison's daughter." She saw my expression change and quickly continued. "I'm not here to cause trouble or defend what she did. I wanted to come thank you in person. Thank me for pressing charges and not accepting some kind of settlement to sweep it under the rug. My mother had problems for years. Control issues, anger issues, obsessive behavior. My father left when I was 12 because he couldn't deal with her anymore. She alienated most of her family. But she never faced real consequences until she messed with you." The little boy tugged on her hand, and she picked him up. "The court ordered therapy she's in, the mental health treatment. It's actually helping." She's been diagnosed with a personality disorder and she's on medication now. She's not perfect, but she's better than she's been in decades. That wouldn't have happened if you'd let her get away with what she did. I didn't know what to say. I'd never considered that pressing charges might actually help Brenda in the long run. I'm glad she's getting help, I finally managed. Nobody should live with untreated mental health issues. She's moving to Colorado when she finishes probation. Fresh start, away from Arizona and all the people who know what happened. But I wanted you to know that some good came out of this nightmare. You saved her life too, in a way. She was spiraling and this was rock bottom. Now she can heal. After Jennifer left, I sat on my couch thinking about the unexpected turns life takes. I just wanted to use my medical equipment during a power outage. That simple act of self-preservation had triggered a chain of events that ended with criminal charges, jail time, HOA reform, and apparently intervention in serious mental health issues. The space heater hummed quietly in my office upstairs, monitoring my vitals like always. Core temperature 98.1 degrees, heart rate 72 beats per minute. All systems normal. I thought about everything I'd learned over the past year. About standing up for yourself, even when it's difficult. About documenting everything when dealing with unstable authority figures. About the importance of understanding your legal rights, especially as someone with a disability. About how complex people can be, how someone causing harm might also be suffering themselves. But mostly I learned that HOA disputes, ridiculous as they often seem, can have profound impacts on people's lives. The system is supposed to help maintain communities, but it can be abused by those who crave power and control. Reform requires vigilance and courage from residents willing to push back against overreach. Ridgewood Estates became a genuinely pleasant place to live after all the changes. Neighbors looked out for each other. The board made reasonable decisions focused on actual community needs rather than petty enforcement. And everyone understood that medical accommodations weren't special privileges to be questioned but legal rights to be respected. I never did get around to thanking Officer Torres properly for her intervention that February evening. I dropped off a gift basket at her police station with a note explaining how her clear-headed assessment of the situation had prevented things from escalating even further. She called me a few days later to say it wasn't necessary, but she appreciated knowing the case had been resolved properly. Detective Ramirez also got a thank you note from me. He treated my concerns seriously when he could have dismissed it as just another HOA squabble. His thorough investigation had made the prosecution's case airtight. 2 years after the incident, I was elected to the HOA board myself. I'd resisted at first, having no desire to be involved with association politics after everything that had happened. But Janet Williams convinced me that people with direct experience dealing with HOA overreach were exactly who should be making decisions about enforcement and rules. My first motion as a board member was to establish an annual review of all HOA policies to ensure they complied with current law and didn't create unnecessary burdens on residents. It passed unanimously. My second motion was to create a resident ombudsman position, someone independent who could review complaints about HOA actions and recommend solutions without requiring formal legal action. That passed too. Slowly, methodically, we built a homeowners association that actually served homeowners instead of controlling them. It wasn't perfect. There were still disputes about parking and noise and landscaping. But they were handled fairly, with respect for residents' rights and recognition that communities are made up of diverse people with different needs. My space heater still sits in my office, monitoring my vital signs while I work. I've replaced it once over the years as technology improved, but the new model does the same job with better accuracy. My medical condition is stable, managed through a combination of the monitoring equipment, careful attention to temperature regulation, and regular checkups with my cardiologist. Sometimes when the weather gets cold and I plug in my heater for the season, I think about that February afternoon when everything went sideways. How a simple power outage became a catalyst for criminal charges, HOA reform, and unexpected personal growth for multiple people. I think about Brenda Morrison, serving her jail time and attending therapy and hopefully becoming a healthier person. I think about Jennifer and her son, dealing with the aftermath of having a family member commit crimes. I think about my neighbors who suffered years of harassment but finally got relief. Mostly, though, I think about how important it is to stand up for yourself, even when it feels easier to just comply with unreasonable demands. Because sometimes that stand doesn't just protect you. It protects everyone who comes after you, everyone who might face similar abuse, everyone who needs someone else to go first and prove that resistance is possible. The HOA tried to steal my space heater during a power outage. They didn't know it contained a medical alert system. That ignorance cost Brenda Morrison her freedom, her reputation, and her position of power. But it also led to reforms that made an entire community better. Justice isn't always immediate or obvious. Sometimes it takes months of legal proceedings and evidence gathering. Sometimes it requires courage you didn't know you had. But when the system works, when people stand up for what's right, things do get better. And that's worth remembering, whether you're dealing with an overreaching HOA president, a difficult landlord, an abusive boss, or any other situation where someone with authority abuses their power. Document everything. Know your rights. Stand firm. And trust that truth and justice will eventually prevail. My townhouse in Ridgewood Estates is truly my home now, not just a property I own in a neighborhood managed by petty tyrants. I can put a rosemary plant on my front step without fear of fines. I can use my medical equipment without harassment. I can live in peace, secure in the knowledge that the HOA serves residents instead of ruling over them. That's what a homeowners association should be. And if yours isn't living up to that standard, maybe it's time to do something about it. Because change is possible, reform is achievable, and justice can prevail, even when it starts with something as simple as a space heater during a power outage.